Alright, and welcome to our 18th episode of TACTALK. I am your host, Alden Morris. In this first half, we're going to discuss some of the new developments that are happening with Initiative 1639 here in Washington State when it comes to how the legislation passed according to we the people. But again, as a reminder, we are not a democracy, we are a republic. So there's some lawsuits happening and developing news with that. In the second half of the show, we will be discussing, again, firearms rights, things like that, but some disagreements that I have when it comes to what the Seattle Times is pushing today, and that is that marijuana, medical marijuana card holders, and marijuana smokers cannot possess or obtain firearms. And, and I disagree with that on two different levels, for both personal and, for the state. So, diving right in. We're going to start with how the NRA lawsuit will expose Initiative 1639 as unconstitutional. Firstly, I want to read an article from November 16th by Nicole Jennings over at Cairo Radio, mynorthwest.com. And it starts out on the same day that the National Rifle Association and Second Amendment Foundation announced they would be challenging Washington State gun measure I-1639 in a federal court. U.S. Marine Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, NRA, president and former host of Fox News, War Stories with Oliver North, told Cairo Radio's Dori that he finds the measure not only unconstitutional, but also incredibly confusing. Sorry about the comms going off there. I don't understand how, one, they're planning to enforce it, and number two, how they're defining what an assault weapon is, said North, stating they had the full 30-page text on the initiative. It's nuts to me. I just frankly don't understand it. And it's true, if you've read the initiative itself, it's a lot of hocus pocus. A lot of, we hope this works. Let's go ahead and put signs up in gun stores in Seattle, and that will deter folks from, breaking the law. In a press release, SAF Vice President Alan Gottlieb stated on Thursday that the initiative, which voters passed in last week's election, is an affront to the constitutional rights enshrined in the Second Amendment and the Washington State Constitution. I-1639 will enact some of the strongest gun control measures in the country, including raising the age to purchase a semi-automatic rifle from 18 to 21. Establishing background checks, mandatory training, and waiting periods before the purchase of a semi-automatic rifle, mandating that gun owners lock their firearms in a safe, and making it a felony if a gun owner's firearm that is not properly locked away is stolen and used in the commission of a crime. Chiefly of concern to the NRA and SAF are the new age restrictions on the purchase of a semi-automatic rifle, as well as initiatives ban on selling firearms to non-residents, which the gun rights organizations say violates the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Again, you can buy a firearm if you are an out-of-state resident. However, it's usually a lot more difficult. There's more forms you guys have to fill out. For example, one of my good buddies, Devin Guy Pearsall, when he came up for our annual jamboree hosted by Jerry Cummings at the SSCDG in Foxtrot, it's over in Eastern Washington. When we got back from our 4-night, 5-day trip, he wanted to buy a firearm from WGS Guns, but he had a Nevada, I believe, Nevada or an Arizona state license. And they basically told him no, because under Initiative 594, it would make it too difficult. They basically told him, we can sell you a firearm, but it's going to take a lot longer. It might not even be, you might have to come back from the Nevada or Arizona where you're from, or it could be shipped down there. There's just a lot of loopholes. It would just be easier if he had gone back to his home state and bought a firearm there. And that's what he ended up having to do. So, that had nothing to do with really I-1639. It was more on the laziness of the gun store itself and the staff and the employees that they didn't want to deal with the paperwork, which they lost the sale in the end, and that's on them. So, since then, on November 16th of 2018, the NRA lawsuit was announced that will expose I-1639 as unconstitutional. Last week I talked to Scott Brown. This is reading from Dori Monson's article here at mynorthwest.com on Cairo Radio. Last week I talked to Scott Brown, a concealed carry permit holder who used his gun to hold a man who allegedly stabbed his ex-girlfriend at Seattle Center until the police arrived. Thank goodness he was armed. We don't know what else the killer was capable of, and thankfully we won't find out because of a good Samaritan with a gun. Early Friday morning, there was a shooting in Frontenac in this case of a 29-year-old man allegedly jumped into a vehicle to steal it, but the car owner pulled out his gun and wounded the would-be thief. I want to know what's going on to happen to a guy who allegedly shot the would-be thief. I hope he is not criminally charged. What we're seeing more and more as Seattle becomes overwhelmed with criminals is the people who are using guns to defend themselves, their property, and each other. Ironically, this comes at a time when there is more of an anti-gun mania than ever before. A week ago, the people of the state passed I-1639, which is one of the most restrictive gun laws in the country, and already is facing a challenge in court alleging that it's unconstitutional. Now remember, we did a talk show way back, more towards the beginning of the first season here of TACTALK, where Judge Dixon actually shot down the I-1639 initiative before it went on to measure ballot. He said it was unconstitutional, obviously, and that it was very confusing and hard to read. Since then, the state Supreme Court put it on the ballot and the people passed it. So here we are, another challenge again with the NRA, and I have some good friends who've been involved in the firearms community for 10 plus years, who don't see the NRA having any type of progress when it comes to this lawsuit. I am hoping for the best, as it is unconstitutional, primarily because of the HIPAA violation. If you want to buy a firearm, you waive your medical privacy rights. So the initiative raises the age to purchase semi-automatic guns from 18 to 21. Unless you're going to argue that 18, 19, and 20-year-olds are not citizens of the state or are somehow not adults, this new law is patently unconstitutional. The law reclassifies some guns as assault weapons. It says that you have to keep your gun locked up, and if someone steals your unlocked gun and uses it to commit a crime, you can be prosecuted. Here's the thing I don't understand. How many times have Tim Eyman initiatives been tossed out for having too many issues within the initiative? Well, how many different issues does I-1639 have? NRA President Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North was on the show on Thursday and told us that I-1639 is nuts. A few hours later, it was announced that the NRA, in partnership with the Second Amendment Foundation, is suing the state over I-1639. Thank goodness. The NRA has a good chance at winning this lawsuit unless our state Supreme Court doesn't see what's so obviously wrong with this legislation. In the meantime, I love what a police chief in a small town of Republic in eastern Washington is doing. And mind you guys, this is very important to listen to. He is recommending that residents ignore I-1639. If you live in a rural area and don't fall into the far-left Seattle liberal agenda, you're probably sick and tired of how a tiny part of the state, geographically speaking, is telling the rest of the state how to live. So the police chief of the Republic has said that we will simply not enforce this new initiative because it is not constitutional. And in quotations here, the Republic City Council declares that all federal and state acts, laws, orders, rules, and regulations past, present, or future in violation of the U.S. and or state constitutions are not authorized by the said Constitution to violate the true meaning and intent as given by the founders and ratifiers, and are hereby declared to be invalid in the City of Republic, shall not be recognized by the City of Republic, are specifically rejected by the City of Republic, and shall be considered null and void and have no effect in the City of Republic. So bravo to those guys. Bravo to that police chief. I wish our Pierce County police chief, our Lakewood, Tacoma, University Place, everyone here would say the same thing. And as much as we're an anti-gun state, we do have law enforcement that do respect your firearms rights. I mean, I've been twice, 3 times, I can't even count, where I've been caught up in a situation with police where I was asked to remove my firearm, and they ran my numbers and saw that everything was clean, and they give it right back. So they usually don't hand you a gun back with your round chambered, but they do hand you back your chambered round, your magazine, your firearm. They put it usually on your passenger seat in a paper bag, or they put it right on your passenger floor within access of reach, so you can comfortably put it back on once they've left the scene. So we're gonna take a break for our first commercial break. I've got my girls here with me. In the next section, we're gonna be next segment, we're gonna be talking about marijuana rights and firearm rights. So stay tuned right after this break. Thank you for listening. At beescombatsystems.com, protecting those who prepare. 801-987-0893 for custom body armor carriers and tactical gear for military, law enforcement, contractors, corporate security, responsible citizens, and border patrol. Bees Combat Systems at beescombatsystems.com. 801-987-0893. Alright, welcome back to our second half of the show, our second segment. During the break, I was trying to find the exact article from the Seattle Times that talks about how Washington State citizens and residents are not going to be able to purchase a gun or own a firearm while in possession of a medical marijuana card. Fortunately, it seems that my search engine skills have not been able to work because I'm not able to find that article. But I did find from the Union Bulletin and from Seattle Times, the Seattle Times, which this one looks like it's back from 2016, so it's not the right one I'm looking for. But it talks about how U.S. court upholds ban on gun sales to marijuana card holders. And it kind of takes place out of San Francisco, and it's by Sudhin Tanhawala, however, Tanhawala. Sorry if I mispronounced that name. A federal ban on the sale of guns to medical marijuana card holders does not violate the Second Amendment, a federal appeals court said Wednesday. Now, again, this is out of San Francisco, California. The definition of the Constitution down there is much different than the Constitution for the rest of the United States, or the Union. Yes, it does violate your Second Amendment rights, because there's nothing in the Second Amendment right actually written or imposed in the Second Amendment that says that the right to the people to possess and bear arms shall not be infringed. Literally shall not be infringed does not mean that in case you happen to grow marijuana, we can infringe on your gun rights. That's shall not be infringed. Remember, our founding fathers of this country, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Mexican, Latin American, Italian. It doesn't matter which ethnicity you are, because being an American is not an ethnicity, it's a nationality. And the founding fathers of this nationality that you possess, that if you're born in the United States, you are an American. The founding fathers of your country were hemp growers. They grew hemp. They grew tobacco. They made their own moonshine. They made their own alcohol. And if they weren't doing it themselves, then they had slaves that did it for them on their plantations. And again, their slaves were treated properly, and they had families themselves. But the point I'm saying is these guys rebelled against a tyrannical government that was not only overtaxing by 3% their tea, but their tobacco and their marijuana and all the goods and trades that they had done with the natives that were already living here, that were the French and the English colonies were also trading with. You had multiple colonies from different European countries here all trading, and only the English colonies that lived under King George were the ones being taxed so much. That's why they revolted and became the American colonies. So again, that's an infringement. This is why I wanted to kind of bring this up on the second half of the show. Not to expose myself as a marijuana smoker. Of course, if you know me, you know I've had my past. Have always agreed that people should be able to grow their own marijuana. People should be able to smoke their own marijuana. I mean, this is an American country. We have the right to put what we want in our bodies. The issue that the government has, especially the federal government, when it comes to marijuana usage, is how do they tax and regulate it? I mean, if someone's growing it out of the garage and selling it out of a dispensary, it's hard to force them to measure out the weight that they're growing, the yielding, and the mathematical differences and discrepancies between that. And, and then the sell the tax per state. So, and we've already seen quite a few states in the union legalize marijuana, and at the same time, they made millions that following year when it came to taxation of marijuana per state. So, I want to keep this second segment short, since the first segment we went into a lot more depth and detail regarding I-1639 and how the NRA is suing Washington State. So take that, Bob Ferguson, our Attorney General, who has obviously his head so far shoved up his ass he can't figure out his own laws that he wants to follow and laws that he doesn't want to follow. It's just like he's dropped in certain cases that should have been gone through. So we're going to cut out early here. Thank you for listening. Tune in to see episode 19, which will be here on Thursday. Thank you guys again for listening.